I believe my eyes. Why have you come back?
Please, sir, we've done what you told us. We've brought you the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. We melted her.
Oh, you liquidated her, eh? Very resourceful.
Yes, sir. So we'd like you to keep your promise to us, if you please, sir.
Not so fast. Not so fast. I'll have to give the matter a little thought. Go away and come back tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Oh, but I want to go home now.
You've had plenty of time already.
Yeah. Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you were really great and powerful, you'd keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now.
Oh.
The great Oz has spoken.
Oh.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
It's over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else.
I think the numbers that you ran through were if you had put that money into an S&P 500 and reinvested the dividends, you'd come up with something like $17 billion, but you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah.
Trade-off, you just mentioned, obviously, the economic pain. What do you think the right balance is between the trade-off of protecting people's lives and the economic hit? I mean, do you see a situation where the global economy could be virtually at a standstill for a year or even more?
Well, it won't go to zero, but it will shrink. Global GDP is going to take, probably the biggest hit ever. Maybe the Depression was worse, or 1873, I don't know. But in my lifetime, this will be the greatest economic hit. But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. People don't feel like going to the stadium when they might get infected. It's not the government who's saying, okay, just ignore this disease. And, people are deeply affected by seeing these deaths, by knowing they could be part of the transmission chain, and old people, their parents, their grandparents could be affected by this. And so you don't get to say ignore what's going on here. There will be the ability, particularly in rich countries, to open up if things are done well over the next few months. But for the world at large, normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population. And so, although there's a lot of work on testing, a lot of work on drugs that we're involved with, trying to achieve that ambitious goal, which has never been done for the vaccine, that rises to the top of the list.
Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control. Sadly, you don't want to completely block off the ability for those, people to go there and come back and move around. So eventually there will be sort of this digital immunity proof that, will help facilitate the global reopening up.
Don't go to crowded places. France is trying to close down restaurants and cafes and bars.
Yeah.
Should that happen here in the United States?
Every single day we meet with the task force and we take a look at what's going on. And you don't want to make a pronouncement that no one should ever go into a restaurant. I mean, I think that might be overkill right now, but everything is on the table.
This will be the new normal until a vaccine is developed.
Until we find a vaccine, going back to normal means putting lives at risk.
We need to produce it and to deploy it in every single corner of the world.
Full vaccination
of our children and pregnant women.
Development of new vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics.
More effective vaccines and therapeutics are developed.
We've already bought the syringes. We already know where it's going to happen. We're thinking about what that's going to be. It's all part of this plan.
And a final question. Are you breathing a sigh of relief yet?
A sigh of relief? No. I never get ahead of myself. I'll breathe every sigh. You know, as Yogi Berra used to say, it ain't over till it's over.
The virus raised the rules. And this one, like all influenza viruses, can change the rules without rhyme or reason at any time.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media
true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation. Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came, and Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment. And so he was ready with a phrase which was torches of freedom. And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch, you see? And so all of this is there together. There's emotion, there's memory, there's a rational phrase, even though it's using a lot of emotional elements. It's a phrase that works in a rational sense. All of this is together. And so the next day, this was not just in all of the New York papers, it was across the United States and around the world. And from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic act.
What Bernays had created was the idea that if a woman smoked, it made her more powerful and independent, an idea that still persists today.
Embrace me, my sweet embrace.
It made him realize that it was possible to persuade people to behave irrationally if you link products to their emotional desires and feelings. The idea that smoking actually made women freer was completely irrational, but it made them feel more independent. It meant that irrelevant objects could become powerful emotional symbols of how you wanted to be seen by others.
We have these really beautiful garters
that normally would be on stockings. So when you put it on, yes, we're covering our face, but it still makes me feel sexy and strong.
Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
Everything is on the table.
This will be the new normal until a vaccine is developed.
Until we find a vaccine, going back to normal means putting lives at risk.
We need to produce it and to deploy it in every single corner of the world.
Full vaccination of our children and pregnant women.
Development of new vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics.
Infectious vaccines and therapeutics are developed.
We've already bought the syringes. We already know where it's going to happen. We're thinking about what that's going to be. It's all part of this plan.
You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
Over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else.
I think the numbers that you ran through were if you had put that money into an S&P 500 and reinvested the dividends, you'd come up with something like $17 billion, but you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah.
Every English language media organization, you've got NPR, National Public Radio, The Guardian, NBC Universal, let me pull up the screenshot here. And then also we had French and German media, El País in Spain was on there. So they've got multiple countries under their thumb, and the fact is that none of these articles come with a warning. Like, there was one, I think LA Times was doing a relatively critical investigation of the Gates Foundation, and it's, paying people for, I don't think it was a media thing, but it was paying people for something else, basically conflicts of interest, because they've got millions of those. But, and Gates Foundation actually went over the writer's head and talked to the editor and tried to get the story killed. Now, I think the story still came out. I don't know if it still had everything in it that it was supposed to have, but yeah, we've got, they give to Johns Hopkins University, of course, National Journal Group, United Nations Foundation, Thomson Media Foundation, which is Reuters, Univision, Public Radio International, Pulitzer Center. So if you think these great journalism organizations are independent, think again. Let's see, there's a lot of them. And then they also pass through groups like New Venture Fund, which are like these sort of dark money pool things, which then distribute the funds further, and then the Gates Foundation is not specifically linked to those recipients. You've also got them giving to colleges like Boston University, International Center for Journalists, which is a totally corrupt organization, Pro Social LLC, I don't know what that is. Let's see, Al Jazeera. It's like you expect Al Jazeera to at least be a little bit more aware of what's going on, but nope. And so a lot of other media organizations that aren't getting this money end up giving Gates favorable coverage by default because they just echo what other people say.
You do what they told you. And now 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 you do what they told you.